President's outing at the 20th anniversary of the Rome Statute of the ICC. We have with us in the studio a lawyer, Benson Iwuagwu. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity.
Now, the President referred to the alarming proliferation of the most serious crimes around the world and that the ICC is needed now more than ever. Now, how can Nigeria effectively play a part in pushing for a stronger ICC?
Nigeria can play an effective part, one, by meeting its obligations to the body. Secondly, by espousing in its criminal justice pursuit and administration those principles that necessitated the coming into being of the International Criminal Court, which is the protection of human rights, the avoidance of crimes against humanity, prohibition of genocides, and the things like that. So it's not just belonging to that body at The Hague. It is being a model. It is letting our criminal justice system pursue after those who commit those kind of crimes and ensure that they are prosecuted. That way, Nigeria will not only be a member on paper, but in practice, which I think is what is very important.
All right, let's go a bit broad on this matter. We know how the ICC has been criticized of being biased, against African leaders in recent times, and how African leaders have sought to leave the ICC because of these allegations. How can the International Criminal Court begin to pacify and invalidate these claims?
Well, one is that by the manning or management of the International Criminal Court, for instance, presently, a Nigerian is the president of that court. The reason it would seem that Africans are more in the eye of the storm is because our institutions of criminal justice are weak. We have a lot of influences, quite unlike other jurisdictions where social institutions, the judicial system, are developed, are independent. Here, for instance, it's just recently that the courts or the judiciary had autonomous funding. So these are issues. It's just because we are at the lower rung of the criminal justice development. That is why it would seem that Africans, otherwise, if an African can be the president, I see no basis for that kind of allegation, yes.
Okay, let's look at this issue now in the light of what my colleague has asked you. Now, the president also called for nations yet to join the ICC to do so. Now, in the light of what is happening in the eastern part of Africa, with the agitations and all of that, how can this call be taken to that level such that every country decides to join the ICC?
It involves a lot of political will, because you discover that crises are reactions to injustices perceived or actual in the system. So for you to be able to get the operators of countries or political systems that are oppressive to join would be a problem.
True.
Rather, what we'll counsel is that there should be much more social consciousness and awareness. We expect that the NGOs, the civil society organizations, even churches, communities, mosques, should begin to be much more sensitive and awake and demand answers. That way, even where a leader, because the good thing is that the International Criminal Court does not prosecute state parties. They follow individuals, whether you are commander, whether you are head of state. If you have committed or crimes against humanity has been committed under your watch, you are liable. So it's difficult when you have, for instance, despots in charge. They can't belong to a body that will sanction them.
Talking about that, how can these leaders, or how can the ICC begin to create more participation from these leaders, considering that some of them are indeed despots? We saw what happened with the Sudanese leader, Omar Hassan al-Bashir, who was able to tour different African countries, even though he was wanted by the International Criminal Court. So how can more leaders begin to participate actively in the proceedings of the courts?
I think it all boils down to the same societal consciousness and agitations, peaceful agitations, because you discover that Bashar
How about
al-Assad,
sanctions, perhaps?
Yes, sanctions, remember, the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court. They don't have their own police. They depend upon the machinery of state parties to be able to enforce. He was in South Africa, nobody could, because, of course, it is rub my back and I rub your back. So it's quite a vicious circle, but it will boil down when your citizens are sufficiently sensitized and you are aware that you are leading enlightened and involved citizens. It will be difficult to play those pranks.
Thank you very much for talking to us on this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.